You guys have something on your end asking me, giving me permission, I guess, to record. How many of you have gotten a chance to, we're in unit 2, maybe you're in unit 3, unit 4? Yeah, awesome, you guys. Keep going. Keep going. For those of you that aren't, please get caught up. Again, I'm such a fan of the power of repetition. And if you can expose yourself to this material before class, it'll make a lot more sense when we come to class and talk about it. Then after class, you review it. Enough times it's going to start clicking. So please be looking ahead. So with that being said, we are in the throes of unit 2. And we started with unit 2 talking about personal property, fixtures, real property, those kinds of things. We also talked about estates. Why don't you guys set your chats, pull your chats back up. But this time I want you to set your chat just to me. You should have 2 choices, chat to everyone or just to me. Is that what we're seeing? So set your chat just to me. And in a private chat, I'd like to hear from everybody. This is that class participation thing that we talked about. And in a private chat, I want you guys to tell me one word answer only. When you hear an estate, what is the one word you think of when you hear estate? And the reason I ask for private chats, one word only, when you hear the word estate, what's the one word you think of? The reason I ask for private chats, I don't want some of you wait to see what everybody else says. And this is, oh yeah, that's my answer too. I want to genuinely know what you think. I know you guys. Same thing when we do math. I'm always going to ask for private chat. So is everybody in? One word? So in one word, the answer for an estate is its interest. It's the type of interest, the degree of interest that you have in a property. So we have 2 different types of estates that we're dealing with. The first one we talked about was a freehold estate, which was an ownership interest. It's a freehold estate because your interest is that you own it. The other type of estate that we mentioned was a leasehold estate. This is your estate of possession. This is for our tenants. What's the tenant's interest in the property? To live there, to possess the property. We'll get to leaseholds, we'll get to landlords and tenants when we get to unit 11. But yeah, in one word, an estate is the interest, the type and the degree of interest that one has in a property. So we talked about several different types of freehold estates. And then we kind of switched gears and we talked about the different forms of ownership. How many own a property in severalty? And you can actually show me how many own in severalty? Just one. One person or one entity. You may also have a concurrent form of ownership. Concurrent forms of ownership can be 2 people own the property. It could be 200 people own the property. Concurrent forms of ownership is 2 or more people, entities owning the property. Now we left in the throes of this discussion. So we talked about, the first one we talked about was tenants in common. We said one of the distinguishing characteristics with the tenants in common is most of the time, those are going to be unequal shares. I tend to think of tenants in common, maybe more like business partners. For example, have you guys ever heard if you're going into business with somebody, never go in 50-50, even if you go in 49-51? If you're going to purchase this property with your business partner, you may want to go in as tenants in common with unequal shares of ownership. Another thing that makes tenant in common is what happens when an owner passes away. And with tenant in common, their interest is going to go to their heirs. We're going to refer back to the will, see what the will says, and have the interest go to the heirs. The other concurrent form of ownership we talked about last week were joint tenants. Joint tenants are typically equal shares. Joint tenants may have something called right of survivorship. If a joint tenancy has a right of survivorship, what right of survivorship says that if you have two people own and one of those people passes away, the interest automatically goes to the remaining owner, who now owns it in severalty. They have severed the other owner. That person has passed away. The interest goes to them. If you don't have right of survivorship, when either one passes away, it will go to the heirs. The third type of concurrent form of ownership that we have, and this is where we're starting anew, the third type of concurrent forms of ownership that we have is tenancy by the entirety. And this is set aside specifically for those who are married when they take title. Did you hear what I just said? We're married and then we buy a house. The act of getting married does not create a tenancy by the entirety. What creates a tenancy by the entirety is the fact that we were married when we purchased this property. North Carolina is a spousal state, which means it takes one to buy, but two to sell. You can buy a house without your spouse, but guess what? You can't sell it without them. Spousal state, one to buy, two to sell. The story I heard in pre-licensing about the spousal state, and I got my license in 2008, and it's funny the things that stick to you, but this one stuck with me. So the story I heard in pre-licensing, spousal state, one to buy, two to sell. Gentleman purchases a condo for his mistress. Do you think his wife knew about it? Doubtful. That relationship runs its course. Gentleman goes to sell the condo, and guess what the attorney says? We need your wife. Gentleman says, uh-oh, to start, right? Guy's got two choices. Either you fess up or find a tenant, or, right? I mean, right? You can't convey one to buy, two to sell. I think a good moral of the story is rent her an apartment. Do not buy her a condo. No, I'm just kidding. Don't have a mistress at all. But but we get the idea, right? You could buy a house all day long without your significant other. You need your spouse to sell it. One to buy, two to sell. Let's see. I see a couple cameras aren't on. I don't know if we're having camera problems tonight or not, but you guys look up, make sure your lights are on so we can see. With tenancy by the entirety, right of survivorship is automatic. Again, what's right of survivorship say? Two people own it, married couple owns it. One happens to one, the interest automatically goes to the remaining spouse. Now, guys, we're not getting into prenups in this class. We're not getting into that thing. So just keep this simple with me, okay? If you want to get into prenups, that's where you got to sign up for law school. But for our purposes, right of survivorship, one to buy, two to sell. When that one passes away, their interest automatically goes to the remaining spouse. When the remaining spouse passes away, that's when the will kicks in. We talked about those 4 unities in joint tenancy. We have the same 4 unities in tenancy by the entirety. Unity of possession says we can't draw a line down the middle of the house and say, this is your half and that's mine. You don't come on my half and I won't come on yours. Unity of interest says we own 50-50. We own equal share, equal ownership. Unity of time says we both took title at the same time, and then unity of title says we are both on the same deed. How we terminate a tenancy by the entirety is either by death of one of the spouses, divorce. If tenancy by the entirety, spouses divorce, and they keep the home, keep the property, they could become joint tenants or tenants in common. We got attorneys involved in this case, so we can definitely hash out the assets. Or could also terminate by mutual agreement. So both spouses agree to sell the property. Both spouses agree to convey. So I mentioned this last week, and I think it's worth mentioning again because I don't want you guys getting stressed out about this. The truth is only attorneys can tell people how to take title, can advise people how to take title. You and I are not attorneys. I can't give this kind of legal advice, but we do need to be aware of it. If you're working with a married couple that wants to purchase a home, tenancy by the entirety is the default. That married couple could decide to do joint tenancy or tenancy in common. They can, but tenancy by the entirety is the default. What if you're working with an unmarried couple? Some will argue that joint tenancy was meant to mimic tenancy by the entirety for unmarried people. But again, we are not going to whip out our pre-licensing books and begin to explain the difference between tenancy and tenancy in common. We can't offer that legal advice. So when you're working with that unmarried couple, the recommendation is you have them spend a couple times with their attorney. We got a closing attorney involved that can briefly explain to them the difference in the two and determine how they should take title. My job when it comes to the different types of ownership is to know when I need to advise my buyers and sellers to talk to an attorney. And remember what we said, a big part of this class is teaching you guys to stay in your lane. So I can't give legal advice. That's one thing we can't do. Default
Julie, I have a question for you.
is tenancy by the entirety. Default for married couples is tenancy by the entirety. Yes, ma'am, Jennifer?
My question is, in a realistic scenario, being on the other side of it, I'm trying to like train my brain. Um, what situation, like at what level is our hands actually in the title work? Because usually on the other side of it, being that my hands are all in it. But as a real estate agent, at what part is it?
You're
Because
going to
I
leave
would
that
think
up to the
that
title agent, to the closing attorney. Yep. And Jennifer, we're going to go through the whole process. We're going to go from contract to closing and everything in between. So we'll get a taste of what everybody does. We're scratching, like I said, we're scratching lots of surfaces in this class. So we'll get a taste of what everybody does. Not to, I sometimes feel that this class is teaching you guys just enough to be dangerous. You get your license and now you have all this information. You're ready to go out and conquer the world. Slow down. You know, even if you know, you still need to stay in your lane. And that's, you know, we're going to help you guys form your lane, help you guys define those lines so you know where to stay. As far as my responsibility, I'm pretty much looking at my buyers and saying, here's a couple closing attorneys I've used in the past. I recommend one of them. They don't have to use anybody I recommend. They can use whoever they want to. Remember, they're the ones buying this house, not me, right? So that's a huge part of this class, Jennifer, is drawing those lines so you know what your lane is. When you're wearing a real estate hat, right? You have.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was questioning myself. Like, what is the realistic level that, like, hey, my hands aren't in this one. I'm stepping back.
That's right. That's right. Some of you may come in other hats that we're going to talk about. Some of you may have another hat. And you kind of need to stop and ask yourself, what role am I playing in this transaction? I think a general good rule of thumb, one hat per transaction. So what hat am I wearing in this transaction? That'll help you draw your line. Yep. So let's look at an example together. While engaged, if you're engaged, are you married? Not yet. Guys, there's only two answers to the question, are you married? You either are or you're not. What's that Facebook status? It depends. No, you either are or you're not. So while engaged, are they married? No. Tom and Nancy purchase a home in Walkertown. They are both named as grantees on the deed. They marry 1 month later. Their marriage does not convert ownership to a tenancy by the entirety because they were not legally married at the time that they took title. When Tom and Nancy purchased this home, they were not married. They would have purchased it as either tenant in common or joint tenancy, whichever one they decided was best for them. And then the day they got married, that status did not change. They will continue to be joint tenants or tenancy by the entirety. And that's the point we're trying to get across here. The act of getting married does not create tenancy by the entirety. It's the fact that you are married when you purchase a home that creates that tenancy by the entirety. Tom and Nancy could go to an attorney, have what's called a quitclaim deed done. We'll talk about that in Unit 5. They can create a tenancy by the entirety, but it doesn't happen automatically. So tenancy by the entirety is set aside for our married people. In the Unit 2 material, the online learning system, I have this chart. Y'all don't write this down. It's in the online learning system. It's in the Unit 2 material. But this just gives us a nice side-by-side comparison of joint tenancy, tenancy in common, and tenancy by the entirety. I think this slide in the online learning system is going to be helpful in a few weeks when you guys are getting ready for that end of class exam. Because truth be told, we're getting ready to move on from this. And, 8 months or 8 weeks from now, you're going to take a test on it. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I forgot what she said. Here's a nice handy dandy chart that you guys can use to help refresh that. Questions on our concurrent forms of ownership? And I know, again, you guys, I know we got power, we got Wi-Fi. It's just going to be an interesting night, but just stick with us the best that you can. If you miss anything, I am recording, right? Did I hit record? Yes. If I ever forget to hit record, I'd rather have all of you tell me than none of you tell me. So if I ever forget, let me know. The last little section in Unit 2 is talking about common interest communities, also known as hybrid forms of ownership. They're hybrid because we're looking at two different types of ownership. Somebody owns the unit, and then we have an HOA, homeowners association, that own and or manage the common areas. So maybe it's a condo, maybe it's a townhome. We're going to talk about each of those. I think one very distinguishing characteristics in these hybrid forms of ownership is that there is some kind of HOA. So we have several different types of these common interest communities. And the first one we have are condominiums, or condos for short. Condo owners don't own land. They don't own air. They own from wall to wall, or sheetrock to sheetrock, or paint to paint. They own only the unit. The building itself is owned by the HOA. Condos, quite often, they're the only form of ownership that can be stacked because you don't have air rights, you don't have land rights. So we can stack those condos. You just own the unit itself. With a condo ownership, or with any type of common community forms of ownership, there's common areas. Why don't you guys pull your chats back up? And instead of just to me, let's set that to everyone. And let's tell everyone in a chat, when you think of a common area, what do you think of? What are things you think of with common areas? The gym, the pool. We're all thinking about the pool on days like this, aren't we? The lobby, the clubhouse, the elevator, the tennis court. the cafe. You're in a nice condo complex. Good for you. Yes, if there's a little restaurant or a cafe, the stairs, the hallways, the breezeways, parking lots, common areas are just that. They're areas that all of us that own in this condominium complex should have equal and access to. And in condo ownership, the common areas are managed by the HOA. They're owned by all the unit owners as tenant in common. So if you own a condo, you own it, you own the unit, and then you also have an ownership interest in the common areas managed by that homeowners association. We're going to talk more about homeowners associations, mostly when we get into unit 6. So hang tight, bear with me. Another thing, ooh, the entrance. Yes, the grand entrance, good common area. Another thing that makes condo ownership unique, you may have exclusive rights to limited common elements. So for example, the condo may come with your own garage or your own parking space, or maybe you get your own storage unit. You have limited rights to, or exclusive rights to some of these limited areas. In North Carolina, now when you hear me say something like that, this could be a good candidate for your state specific, the state specific section of your exam. So in North Carolina, we have something called the North Carolina Condominium Act of 1986. And what the Condo Act of 86 does is it requires the developer in new construction condominiums. The Condo Act does not cover resale. So brand new condos popping up, there's a couple things that the developer has to do. They have to file a plat map. We're going to talk about that. They have to file bylaws, covenants. Think of the rules. The bylaws and the covenants are like the rules of the condominium complex. The plat map shows us where the buildings are. So they have to file that on record so everybody can see that, have access to that. We're going to talk about recording when we get to unit 5. The developer has to provide a public offering statement. This just discloses the ownership of the condominium, the structure, the management. So it lays out the various pieces of the condo. Roderick, was that did I question?
I do have one when you finish.
Okay, all right. One more thing here. The other thing, and this is the big one down here, you guys. The developer of a new condominium, new construction condominium has to give the buyer a 7-day recession period. A recession period allows the buyer to cancel their contract. If you terminate within this 7-day recession period, you take your contract back. If you put down any deposits, you'll get your money back. You have 7 days to take this contract, go home, look at it, talk to your attorney if you have to. And if you're not on board, you can terminate your contract and get your deposits back. Again, this only applies to new construction. The very first person to buy each unit has that 7-day recession. After that, there are resales, and you do not have this 7-day recession period. The 7-day to rescind or take your contract back. Thank you, Roderick, for your patience.
And that is my question. So there is absolute for the resales, no period of rescission. Boy.
Unless the parties agree otherwise, right. But according to the Condominium Act of 1986, correct.
Interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.
For resales, now the developer's not quite off the hook. They still need to provide this resale certificate. Again, kind of show what are the monthly dues. How do they charge special assessments? They may issue special assessments. Maybe they need to repave the parking lot. Maybe they need to redo all the roofs of all the buildings. they're going to issue all owners a special assessment. In other words, we're all going to contribute paying for these improvements of the common areas. So they do have to provide this information. A buyer has a right to know what they're buying. So if they're getting ready to put a special assessment on, for example, we have the right to know that. But correct, in a resale, there is no right to rescind. There is no rescission, period. So condo owners, you own space, you own air, wall to wall, sheetrock to sheetrock, paint to paint. You also own the common areas as tenant in common with the other owners. Now we're going to compare condos to townhomes in just 1 second. But before we look at townhomes, we go in order of the book. The next thing the book talks about is something called a cooperative ownership, also known as a co-op. With a co-op, you don't own real property. With a co-op, you purchase stock, and that stock gives you the right to live there. That's that proprietary. It's not going to come out. This word right here, proprietary. There it is. I was thinking about it too much. Proprietary lease gives you the right to live there, the permission to live there, because you own stock in this corporation. We don't see many of these around here. I've heard of one in Charlotte, but I don't know how legit what I heard was, and I can't tell you the name of it, so I even hesitate to say that. Where we see most co-ops are older, bigger cities. So think Boston, Philly, New York. Very, very common up there in those bigger, older cities to not own the property, buy stock, by purchasing stock that gives you that proprietary lease, that occupancy agreement. Another common interest property are townhomes. Townhomes and condos are different. They're not the same. Townhome owners usually own air. They usually own land. It may not be much, but it's definitely more than the condo. Something we see common in townhomes are party walls. Townhomes are sometimes called row houses because you can stack them up 2, 5, 20 side by side by side. They have this common wall called a party wall. What I mean by that is on the other side of this wall is somebody else's unit. We share this wall. Another thing that makes townhomes and condos different is how the common areas are owned and managed. With a townhome, they're owned and managed by the HOA. The owners don't own the common areas as tenant common. And townhomes don't fall under the North Carolina Condominium Act because they're not condos, they're townhomes. However, there is the North Carolina Planned Community Act that assists in development of townhomes. There is no rescission period with the townhome. That's only specific to condos covered under the Condo Act, the Condominium Act. So they're just not as heavily regulated. Again, this Planned Community Act, we're going to learn builders and developers have to build to meet certain standards. We're going to talk about building safety codes when we get in unit 5 or 6. So if we were to do just a nice side-by-side comparison, condo owners, you don't own airspace, you don't own land. Townhome owners, you do. You own the little bit of air above your unit, you own a little bit of land. It might be the strip of land in front. Townhomes may have like a patio or a pad out back. That's all yours. That's all yours. That's part of your ownership. The other big difference is how the common areas are handled. Condos, they're managed by the HOA, owned by the owners as tenants in common. In townhomes, the common areas are managed and owned by the HOA. before we look at the next thing, actually, before we take a break, let's don't go anywhere just yet. I do want to go out. I want to look at the online learning system. And if we look in the Unit 2 material, have you guys had a chance to poke around in here yet? Kind of play around? Is everybody in? Perfect. If you are not, please get in. If you have trouble getting in, get with Jane. There's a little tutorial in Lane's email that can show you how to get in. If you're not, please do. But if we look in the Unit 2 material, one thing I have in here for you guys is a Q&A on condos and townhomes. Now, you're going to see these kind of scattered all throughout the online learning system. So I just want to take a minute and introduce you to these Q&As and kind of let you know their source. So I'm going to just scroll down for a second so we can all see this. Where do these things come from? They come from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Remember, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission are the reason why we're here. They're the ones that set up pre and post licensing. These Q&A brochures are not necessarily for you. They're written more for the public. Who can remind me what the Real Estate Commission's main purpose is?
Protect the public.
To protect the public.
That's right, to protect the public. And one way they can protect the public is to help educate the public. So they've created all these Q&A brochures. Sometime in the next few weeks, I'm going to take you guys out at the commission's website. I'm actually going to show you where you can find them. Now, I don't have them all here, just the ones that are relevant to what we're talking about. So as you go through these Q&A brochures, keep in mind, I mean, these were written for and to the public, but I do think they're awfully helpful for you guys as you're trying to wrap your brains around this information. I also think this is helpful for you guys. Fast forward, you pass my end of class exam, you pass your state exam, and now you're working with your very first buyer ever, and they want to buy a townhome, and they have a lot of questions about the difference. The wheel has already been created, you guys. You don't have to come up with this with your own words. The commission provides us and the public a lot of information that we can use, and the commission says, hey, if you find a resource on our site, you're welcome to use it, because that's what they're all about, is protect the public. So again, we'll show you guys where you can find all this once you are licensed. I'm a big fan of teaching you guys how to fish, because Julie's not always going to be around to provide it in a nice handy dandy online learning system. So I do think these Q&A brochures, particularly this one on condos and townhomes, talks about those differences. It's another good resource to help you guys wrap your brains around this information. Questions so far? Comments so far? We ready for our first break? All right, let's go ahead and take 10. Remember, you guys, this 10 minutes goes by fast, so keep track of your time. Come back in 10, then we're going to talk about another common form of ownership. guys get a chance to scarf down dinner? Yeah. Eat when you can. Welcome back. So cameras are back on. Remember to be counted here for this hour. I need to be able to see you. If you ever miss screenshot for attendance, just shoot me a chat. Let me know you're back. So I'm going to do a couple screenshots. May not see a flash on your end. So these hybrid forms of ownership, community forms of ownership. We talked about condos, we talked about townhomes, we talked about co-ops. The last common form of ownership, hybrid form of ownership we have are timeshares. Timeshares are, you own a unit, but you only own it for a certain period of time each year. You can't go there whenever you want. When you purchase a timeshare, you know, this is my week. This is my week to go to the beach, my week to go to the mountains, wherever your timeshare is. So with a timeshare, what we're saying is you own a unit with like 51 other people, right? So you have your week and you have the ability to go. Now there's a couple other distinguishing characteristics about a timeshare. This first bullet point here is the true definition, part of the true definition of a timeshare. In order to qualify, be classified as a timeshare, you have the right to occupy the unit at least 5 or more separate periods of time over at least 5 years. I need you guys to underline that at least. At least is the minimum. So if you own 4 separate time periods over 4 years, you don't own a timeshare. If you owe 10 separate time periods over 10 years, you have a timeshare because you've met that minimum requirement of 5. So something that you purchase at least 5 or more separate time periods over at least 5 years. With timeshares, there's a 5-day recession period. How many day recession period did we just say with condos? You can show me. How many did we just see with condos? 7. So now with timeshares, we're dealing with 5. Again, 5 days. You go under contract with the developer of this timeshare. Maybe it's new construction, maybe it's a resale. Any timeshare has this 5-day recession period. Within that time, go under contract, and within 5 days, you decide you don't want to purchase. Maybe you looked over the contract. Maybe you had your attorney look over it. If you rescind your contract, you take it back. If you rescind your contract and you put down any money, any deposits, you'll get that back. So you take your contract back, you get your money back. Basically, if you rescind a contract, both parties go about their lives as if this never happened. We put everybody back in the position that we were before we entered into this contract. The other thing about timeshares, the developer has to keep the buyer's deposit in an escrow account, also known as a trust account. We're going to talk about trust accounts. We're going to talk about escrow accounts. We're going to talk about all that. But for right now, let's just know that the developer has to keep that deposit in an escrow account for 10 days or until that contract is rescinded. Once the buyer rescinds, then the developer has to refund their deposit. If the buyer doesn't rescind, we keep this money in our escrow account for 10 days. On day 11, the builder can move it to their operating account and use it to conduct their business. 7 days for NC only. Is a 5-day timeshare for US total or NC only? I don't know the answer to that question. So all we really know about timeshares is that they have this 5-day to rescind. I'm not sure if that's specific to North Carolina. I don't know. Obviously not important, right? There's a school of thought out there that some timeshare developers are shady, manipulative, try to trick buyers into buying, try to sucker them into these timeshares. There's stories that back that up. They've cracked down. They've gotten serious. They've created laws to help to protect the consumer. And that's part of what we're dealing here with the timeshare ownership. Couple things to know. It doesn't matter what you call it. If you call it, the Coast's Vacation Resort, if it fits the definition of a timeshare, it falls under this act. It falls under the law that governs timeshares. So what I'm telling you is if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a timeshare. Whatever you name it, whatever you call it, if it meets this definition. And all timeshare developers, and well, maybe it is specific to North Carolina, have to follow this timeshare ownership. An easy way to help you guys remember timeshares, y'all push back, give yourself some room. I don't want you to punch your device. So give yourself, yeah, I know, scary, right? Push back, give yourself some room. And one way you guys can help remember, some of you are already going, one way you can remember, anything you need to know about timeshares, just remember 5, 5, 5, 10. And then for fun, throw in jazz hands. You're not going to get quizzed on jazz hands, but aren't they just fun? So let's try this together. What do we need to know about timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10, jazz hands. That was kind of weak, y'all. Come on. What do we need to know about timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10, jazz hands. This is it, you guys. You can get a whole lot more involved if you want, but we're just scratching surfaces, remember? Interestingly enough, timeshares are one of the very first things we talk about in this class. Timeshares are also one of the very last things that we talk about in this class. So this will come back up near the end. And you know what y'all are going to see near the end? 5, 5, 5, 10. And don't forget the jazz hands. So timeshare ownership. Again, there's a common area. Some timeshares are nice. We went to one, my uncle had one in Virginia, and they had like a water park and an arcade and a gym, and it was a lot of fun. It was a fun week. It was an event. They want you, once they get you there, they want to keep you there. So they give you all this stuff to do in most cases. You go down to resorts, Myrtle Beach, for example, even up and down the coast of North Carolina, the mountains, you're going to find these things. So just another way to help protect the consumer. Like we said, it doesn't matter what you call it. These are just some examples. You don't need to write these down, but it doesn't matter what you call it. If it's a vacation lease, a prepaid hotel reservation, if it fits the definition of a timeshare, if it fits that definition of 55510, then it falls under the Timeshare Act and is regulated by the real estate commissions. Another thing that makes timeshares unique. Let me talk to you again about the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. The North Carolina Real Estate Commission is the governing body that regulates your license. Another way that they can protect the public is by issuing your license. How do they issue a real estate license? Because you prove to them you know enough to go work with their public. How do you prove that to them? You pass the end of class exam and you pass the state exam. The Real Estate Commission is not going to fine most licensees. If you violate any of the commission's laws or rules, which is what we're talking about in this class, you could be subject to disciplinary action. Disciplinary action on your license means it could be suspended, it could be reprimanded. Worst case scenario, it could be revoked. We're going to talk about that disciplinary action. I want to make sure we're all clear on that because I don't want any of you to face disciplinary action. So no, North Carolina Real Estate Commission cannot fine you. They just regulate your license. Now, could you be sued by your buyers and sellers, taken to court, be fined by the judge? Of course. The judge can fine you, the commission cannot. Is everybody with me? So they're going to regulate your license issue once you prove to them you have that knowledge, and then they're going to regulate it while you have your license. There is one exception to this for timeshare developers only. And with timeshare developers, the Real Estate Commission has the right to fine that developer up to $500 per violation. This is the only time that the North Carolina Real Estate Commission is going to get involved with matters of money. This is the exception. Again, we're going to talk about that disciplinary action. We're going to talk about how I can keep you out of any disciplinary actions. And that's what this whole class is about. But know that there is only one time that the Real Estate Commission will get involved with matters of money. And that is if you are a timeshare developer. The last thing I have to say in Unit 2, just kind of off to the side, changing gears again just a bit. Something called a trust, and trust is just estate planning. Some people choose to set up a trust. It's a way for your family to avoid probate when the individual passes away. Probate is the reading of and the dissecting of the will. And probate sometimes can get expensive and it can get nasty when families start arguing about that will. So one choice that an individual may have is to put their estate in a trust. With a trust, there's the grantor, which is the owner of the property. There's the beneficiary, who's the one that plans to benefit and receive the property once the individual passes away. And then there's this third impartial party that's brought on to handle the affairs, to handle the estate planning. And that is our trustee, who is going to be an attorney. So if you set up in a trust, if you set up some estate planning, what you're doing is having your family avoiding probate, avoiding some kind of nasty will. If you want to know more about trusts, call your attorney. If your buyers and sellers want to know about estate planning, have them call their attorneys. And that gets us through Unit 2. So whenever we finish a unit, I remind you guys of those key terms. Guys, remember, look at those key terms. Go through and look at those words. In this case, on page 20. Do you know what this means? Do you know what that means? Ooh, you don't know what this means? Look it up. You got the glossary in the back of the book. You know where at the unit it is. So those key terms, Pre-licensing 101. You got to know what the word means. So use those key terms. The key point review on page 43 is kind of like your Cliff's Notes, if you will. It gives you a nice brief summary of Unit 2. I think the key point review is best near the end of this class when you guys are getting ready for that exam. It's a good way to come back and review each unit quickly. Again, if you're looking at something at the key point review and you don't know what it means, that's what we need you to go back and look up. We need to make sure you understand. And then, of course, at the end of every unit, there's a student quiz. I suggest the quizzes in your book, in this case on page 47, treat it like a real test. Set your timer. I'd say about 2 minutes per question. Don't look at the answer until you've taken the test. And if you get one wrong, that's okay. Let's take this as a learning opportunity. So if you get a question wrong, look it up, find the right answer. And guys, it's not just looking up what the right answer is. It's also looking up why you answered the way you did. Why did you put that wrong answer? Because something up here got crossed and you put C and you should have put A. So it's not just, oh yeah, that's right, I knew that. Why did you put the answer that you did? And I'll be really honest. A lot of times you guys come back to me and say, I knew that, I just read it too fast. What should that tell you? Slow down. Read every single word. If you're glossing over, if you're reading these questions as fast as you possibly can, you're missing something, and every single word means something. So use what you have in your book, key terms, key point review, and your student quiz. to help you know how you're doing with this material. If you are gauging yourself as we go, if you are grading yourself and taking these quizzes as we go, there shouldn't be many surprises on test day because you know how you feel. In just 1 second, I'm going to even show you guys how you can grade yourselves, how you know if you're good with Unit 2 or if you failed Unit 2 and you need to go back and review it. So we'll look at that next. Let me just ask if we have any questions.
Miss Julie, so we can just take those tests on in like the electronic part many times as we want to.
Correct. And you know, Sandra, what I like about the online learning system is as soon as you answer it, it tells you it's right or wrong.
Right.
But most importantly, it tells you why. To me, in the online learning system, the why is the most helpful. So you treat the one in your book like a real test. Use the online learning system to help you get that knowledge, help you wrap your brain around that information.
Okay, that's why I texted you the other day. I was scared
Times
to
if you want to.
keep doing them over. I was like, oh Lord, is it greatness? So that's why I was like, let's kind of skeptical. And that's why I went to the one in the book because I didn't know if the one on the
Nope.
computer was greatness or not.
There's only one grade that counts. And I want you guys to do whatever you have to do to get to that grade at the end of class. If you got to take it 20 times, great, take it 20 times. You guys poked around in those online questions. I call them interactive questions, the online learning system. Again, I think it's so helpful for the why. I think that's what we want to know the most. Why? And I think that's where the online learning system can help us. Oh, yeah, that's why. And then using that book as a resource. Let's see. Yep, they are the same, but we're going to use them for two different things. Like I said, we're going to get the why from the online learning system. We're going to see how we did on this material in the book. So you've been writing, good, and then taking the quiz outline, awesome. Awesome, and going through weekly, yep. Because remember, we're always reviewing where we're going and we're looking back at where we've been. So if I can get you guys looking ahead before we get here, but more importantly, I need you reviewing once we leave class. So please make sure you're setting aside that time. Anybody get a chance to play with their calendars this weekend and set aside some study time? Get yourselves organized. Like I said, you guys, we got this week and then starting next week, we get into like some deep stuff. We're getting ready to see lots and lots and lots of red stars next week. This week, I got to build you up to it. And that's what we're doing this week. Denise, that's going to be part of our, so again, we're not going to go back, but if we look at our fee simple to feasible, that is the life estate, or excuse me, the freehold estate that has limitation on how you use the property. And there are a couple fee simple to feasibles that I would like you to go back and review. But the big picture of fee simple to feasible, you buy a property with a limitation on how you can use it. So what I want to do now, and I need to stop sharing just for 1 second. So bear with me, hang tight. Because what I want to do now, before we get into Unit 3, I want to and I had it right here, and now I don't, so I apologize. Give me 1 second. Here it is. I want to go off book for just a second. When we get into Unit 3, if we don't see it tonight, we'll probably start talking about it tonight, but more on it on Thursday. But we start on math, testable math, as early as Unit 3. So before we get there, I want to take just a minute and I just want to introduce you, just go off book and introduce you to some math things to help you guys get going on this. And I also want to introduce you to my favorite math tool. I say if you can get this, you can get like 80% of this math. So I want to introduce you to it. And then when we get to Unit 3, we're actually going to use it in practice. I've been offering math tutoring since like 2010, something like that. I've been doing it quite a while. And I get some of the more common questions in my math tutoring. And one of the concerns I get in math tutoring is translating that math problem into a formula that we can work and find solutions. We don't read math, we do math. And it's hard to take those words and put them in a math problem. So I think a big part of math is understanding what some of these words are that you can expect to see. So one word I want to introduce you to in a math problem is the word of. When you see the word of in a math problem, what that problem is telling you to do is multiply. And we're going to see examples of this, like I said, in unit 3, we're going to see of. So in other words, we could say 350,000 times 25%, but it's the exact same thing as saying 25% of 350,000. What does the word of mean? That word means multiply. Do you guys have, I know you may not have gone calculator shopping yet, but if you don't have a calculator, do you at least have your phone with you? I'll let you use your phone today. How many of you have been calculator shopping? Oh, good. If you haven't been yet, please go. Again, we want you practicing on those not so smart calculators. The one on your phone is very smart. Your basic calculator, not so much. So why don't you guys set those chats to private? And just to get us warmed up, tell me in a private chat, what is 25% of 350,000? Those zeros, right? Details. So on your not so smart calculator, what we should have done was taken 350,000 times 25%. That's all we're saying with of. Now, you guys got some choices with your calculations. You could say 25 and then hit the percentage key. You could also convert that percentage into a rate and say 350,000 times 0.25. You're going to get the same thing. The rate is 0.25. The percent is 25%. The difference is moving that decimal over 2 places. What I tell you guys is do rate or percent. Pick your favorite and stick with it. Don't try to toggle back and forth. So either you're going to take 25% to turn it into 0.25, or you're going to use the percent key on your calculator. The reason why I stress a not so smart calculator, if you had done this on your phone is smart enough to know that if you put in like if you put in 25% times 350, your phone is smart enough to do that. Your not so smart calculator is not. Your phone is a lot smarter than this, which is why I want you guys getting started on this right now. Is everybody good? I cannot let you use your phone on the test. So please start practicing with this now. Okay, so we know what the word of means. Let's just put this in something a little bit more practical, a little bit more something that we might see in real estate. Lane is selling her home for $250,000. She pays her real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? And you can tell me in a private chat. Yeah, hang on. I'll explain that in a second. So when we see 5% of the sales price, what we're saying is that to find this commission, we're going to take our sales price, 250, and we're going to times it by 5%. 5% of what? 5% of the sales price. Everybody see that? So that word helps us know what to do. That word helps us know that we need to multiply something. So when on my not so smart calculator, I take 250,000 times 5%. And some of you are going, woohoo, we're getting commission at 12,500. Hold tight. We're going to talk about your commission in Unit 8. We're going to talk about in Unit 8 that it's not your commission. It's the firm's commission. How much of that are they going to give to you? Well, that's up to the firm that you're affiliated with. So we're going to look at this breakdown. I don't want everybody running to the bank just yet, spending 12,500. You will get a piece of that. Again, we're going to talk all about your commission, how you can calculate your commission, fun math when we get to Unit 8, but we got a ways to go before that. So let's just know that right now. The firm is collecting 12,500 on this transaction, and they will share their commission with you. Kind of ouch, right? But reality check. The firm's got bills to pay too, you guys. They got power and paper and water and admin that takes such good care of you guys, and that broker in charge. So there's other sources out there as well. So that's the word of. We'll see that again and again and again. What I want to do now is introduce you guys to my favorite tool in math, and it's called the T-bar. If you guys will take a second to jot this down or take a quick picture of it, and then we're going to talk about what this means. So when we look at the T-bar, we're looking at three different variables. We're looking at something called the part, we're looking at something called the whole, and we're looking at something called the rate or percent. The majority of the time, when you're reading a math problem and you see rate or percent, most of the time we can use a T-bar. There are going to be some math that we come across in this class that you just have to memorize the formula. Knowing the formula is like 80% of the battle. If you don't know the formula, you don't know how to do that problem, you might as well just put B and move on to save yourself some time, or C, or whatever your favorite letter is. If we see rate or percent, then we know for the most part that we can throw down a T-bar. The rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. Did you guys just hear my absolute word? Remember, we introduced you to absolute word. Is there any exception to the word always? No. Every single time you use a T-bar, the rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So that's the easy part. When you're doing a math problem and you know you can use a T-bar, the rate or percent goes in the bottom right. The other two variables, there's the part and there's the whole. The whole is just that. The whole, 100%. The part is a piece of it. There's lots of parts that make up a whole, right? There's this part and that part over there and this part over there. So there's lots of parts that make up the whole. And what we're looking for, what we're using the T-bar is to figure out what percentage of that part is part of the whole. The back fourth line in the T-bar means divide. The up-down line in the T-bar means multiply. The T-bar allows me to solve for the part or the whole or the percent. So what I'm telling you guys, when we look at a T-bar, what we're actually looking at are three different formulas. If you're asked to solve for the part, if your X, your unknown variable, is the part, then you take the whole. Up, down line means multiply. Multiply by the percent or rate. If your unknown variable is the whole, then you take the part and divide it by the percent or rate. If your unknown variable is the percent, you take the part and divide it by the whole. We have choices. We can either bear with me and learn how to use the T-bar, or you got three formulas to memorize every time we could use the T-bar. May I suggest working with me and giving the T-bar a shot? Because once you get it, you see the word rate or percent, and we know we can use it. This doesn't come overnight. Y'all aren't leaving class tonight as a T-bar expert. This comes with practice. All math is practice, 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 practice. And we got plenty of practice for you guys for all of the math. Do y'all think Michael Jordan was amazing the first time he picked up a basketball? Do you think he had to practice, 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 practice? You guys need to be like the Michael Jordan's math, okay? We got to practice. You're not going to see me do something in class and be like, oh, I got this, I'm good. I need you to practice. And again, all the math that we do has practice, adequate practice for you guys. So let's say, for example, let's look at some examples here. Let's say, for example, you are reading a word problem. And in the problem, you see that it's 4% commission and the sales price is 250,000. And the question wants to know, what is your commission? How much is your firm going to collect? I've read the problem. I may not know anything, but at least I know I can throw down a T-bar. We just said the rate or percent always goes where? Always goes in the bottom right. Don't think about it. Rate or percent goes in the bottom right. Take that out of your guesswork. Rate or percent goes in the bottom right. Now I'm left with the sales price and what is your commission, or what is the firm's commission? Which one is less, commission or sales price? I can see your mouths move. Unfortunately for us, commission, right? Commission is going to be the smaller number. Commission is part of the sales price. That's right. The commission is part of the whole. So with your commission, what I'm telling you is that your X in this case is the number on top. It's what I'm solving for, knowing that the whole is our sales price of 250,000. We just said the up down line means multiply. So how do we calculate your commission? On our not so smart calculators, we take 250 times it by 4% or 0.04, and we get commission for your firm of $10,000. Now, this is what happens. And hey, I get it. Y'all remember I sat where you did once too. In the heat of the test, you're going, oh my gosh, which is smaller? Which number is smaller? Commission, sales price? I don't know. One thing I like so much about the T-bar, we can kind of, if you're not sure what number goes on top and what number goes on the bottom left, we can take, 3.5 seconds and kind of finagle these numbers a little bit. So we're in the heat of the test. Zoom changed my annotations. I'm not digging the new annotations. There we go. We're in the heat of the test. And you can't for the life of you remember, is this number the part or is this number the whole? Which number goes on top and which number goes on the bottom left? Where did we just say the rate or percent always goes? Always in the bottom right. I can't remember which is which. So you know what? I'm going to take 3 seconds and I'm going to do it both ways. And I'm going to see if one of these answers makes more sense than another. I know the rate of percent goes there, but what happens if I switch those and I take 250,000, divide it by 4%, I'm getting a commission of $6,250,000. Yes, this class would be a lot bigger. First off, everybody in their lives would sell one house and then retire, right? We'd all be done. Does it seem reasonable to get a $6 million commission when you sell a $250,000 home? Unfortunately, no. But by switching those two numbers, keeping the rate of percent where it always goes, bottom right, and by switching those two numbers, we can quickly eliminate that second T-bar and know that our commission is going to be 10,000, so we can go from that and move on. Math tutoring, probably one of the hands down, the number one question I always get in math tutoring is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my highly educated response to you is, do it both ways and see what answers you get. You guys can spend a lot of time staring at a blank piece of paper on your test, or you can pick your pencil and calculator up and do something, figure out the 10,000 and then move on. I suggest doing something, figuring out which answer makes the most sense, and then moving on. Rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. For the most part, the number on top is going to be smaller than the number in the bottom left. We only have one exception to that, and we're like near the end when we see it. So we'll remind you of this when we get there. But until then, the smaller number goes on top. It's part of that whole. So far, so good? It's my personal mission, every pre-licensing class I teach, to convert you guys to T-bar fans. So if you're going, oh, this seems nice, I'm working on you. If you're going, I'm not sure about this, don't worry, I'll get you. I'll get you. When we start working this thing, I do think it's good. I think if we can understand like T-bar 101, which is what we're doing here, I do think it's helpful, especially as we start getting more in depth in this math. So now, knowing what we know, let's look at the same problem that we just looked at a few minutes ago. So we already know the answer, but now we're going to take this and we're going to use it in the T-bar. So we read the problem. Lane sells her home for $250,000, pays a real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? Rate or percent always goes where? Always, bottom right. We are solving for our commission, and we know the sales price is $250,000. 250,000 times 5% gave us our, what was that one? 12,500. When we do math together, again, starting in Unit 3, I'm primarily T-bar. We'll, look at formulas. I'll show you on my screen what you should be putting in your calculator. The order you put it in your calculator matters. So I want to make sure that we're good on that. Again, it's probably been a while since we've used a not so smart calculator. So I encourage you to go calculator shopping sooner rather than later, so you can start practicing on this one. I will never forget, we were still in person, and a young lady came into class on test day, pulling her calculator out of the container and asking me how to use it. Please don't be that young lady. Everybody promise me? Pinky swear. Okay. Go calculator shopping now. So with the T-bar in mind, as I mentioned, I want to show you guys because I want you guys to be grading yourselves as you go. I want you to be knowing how you did in Unit 2. How'd you do in Unit 10? I want you guys knowing your progression. That'll help you identify your areas of weakness and help you know which units you need to spend more time on than others. So to help you grade yourself, let me introduce you to a T-bar. The part that we're looking at is going to be the number you get right. The whole is the total number of questions of the quiz. And then the rate or percent is your score. So let's say you take this Unit 2 quiz tomorrow. And I'm going to write Zoom and letter. I'm not digging what they've done to me. You took this quiz in Unit 2 and you want to know, did I pass? Does anybody remember what passing for my exam is? See mouths move. Yep. 75%. I would encourage you to have that at least as your benchmark. Actually, I encourage you guys to have like an 80 or an 85, give yourself some wiggle room for test day, but 75 is the minimum. So you took the Unit 2 quiz and you want to know if this were the real test, would I have passed it? So our X, our unknown in that case, is your score. The Unit 2 quiz has 25 questions. You take the Unit 2 quiz, you grade yourself, and you get 17 right. 17 divided by 25, that fourth line means divide. 17 divided by 25 is 0.68, which shakes out to 68%. Did you pass the Unit 2 quiz? No. What do you need to do? Go back to Unit 2. Watch the video again, read the book again. We got to give you a couple more questions to get you over at least 75. Again, if I were you guys, I'd strive for 80. Give yourself some wiggle room. So take the number you get right. That says 5. Sorry about that. Take the number you get right, divide it by the total number, and that gives you, there we go, your score. 68% is not passing. Some units are going to be stronger for you guys than others. We can use those stronger units to up that score, but overall, we need a 75%. As we get closer and closer to the end, we do have cumulative exams, 100% exams, final exam reviews, that kind of thing. But we are so far away from there. Right now, we're just looking at each question as each quiz as it comes up. Questions? I know I'm just a few minutes early, but we're at a really good stopping place. So let's go ahead and take our break. And when we come back, we're going to be ready to jump into Unit 3. Welcome back. Cameras are on, so let me take attendance real quick. We are into Unit 3. Unit 3 is entitled Encumbrances on Real Property. So we're going to talk about first off what that word means, and then we're going to talk about things that are encumbrances on real property. So our guide or our roadmap for this unit, first thing we're going to do is define what the heck an encumbrance is. We're going to talk about liens. If you have liens on your property, it means you owe somebody some money. So we're going to talk about the different types of liens. We're also going to talk about easements. Practically everybody I know has an easement on their property. So we're going to talk about those and what those look like. Now, the big thing in this unit is talking about our property-specific North Carolina property taxation laws. All properties in the state are subject to property taxation. So we'll talk about that. And then this is the first unit that we, for real, pick up the calculator. And the math that we're going to do at the end of this unit is calculating property taxes. So, first thing we need to do is define an encumbrance. And an encumbrance is just anything that affects the title to real estate. Title is idea of the ownership. We're going to talk about title. We're going to talk about what that means when we get to Unit 5. But for now, we just need to know that an encumbrance affects that title. It affects that right to ownership. An encumbrance is a limitation. It limits what you can do with the property, even if you own it fee simple absolute. Remember what we said, fee simple absolute is the highest form of ownership. You own it all. You own the land, you own the air, you own the subsurface, and everything in between. Most properties have some kind of an encumbrance on them. Encumbrances aren't necessarily good or bad. They're just something that affect the title. Encumbrances are almost always appurtenant. What does it mean if something is appurtenant? It, you guys are running with me, runs with the land. It conveys from one owner to the next to the next. So encumbrances, for the most part, are pretty permanent. They're there, they run with the land. And what this unit is taking these word encumbrances and talking about the different things that could encumber or affect your property, affect your real property. So the first encumbrance, the first thing that most properties have is a lien. If I could take a play on words, if you guys see the word lien, what I'd actually like you to see is loan. If you have a lien on your property, you owe somebody some money. And how they protected their interest was by placing a lien on the property.
Quick question. What is the feed? Is a feed owner of the property? What's that?
I'm sorry?
Said feed owner of the property. What does that mean?
Where do we see that?
I'm seeing it in the book.
Okay, so where are you?
Page 51.
Okay.
The definition of encumbrance. Encumbrance.
So anything that affects title to real estate.
It is the right or interest held by the party who is not the feed owner.
I see. So that's referring to fee simple absolute. You're the fee owner. So it's the fee simple absolute, that highest form of ownership that we talked about in Unit 2. Okay. So a lien on the property, they don't have a possessory interest. They don't have permission to be there. They don't own the property. You just owe them money, and they are protecting their interest by placing a lien on the property. Liens are recorded in public record. Who do you think can access the public records? The public. They're open to all. So if you have a lien, if you owe somebody money that gets recorded, it's going to be on public records. When you go to buy a home, you hire a closing attorney. And we're going to talk about what the closing attorney does and their role when we get to Unit 5. But one thing that we're going to learn that the closing attorney does is this very thorough search of the public records. The closing attorney wants to find everything about this title, including any outstanding liens. And if you're selling your home and there are liens on the property, those got to be taken care of before that deed changes hands. The seller will pay off all liens before they can convey to the buyer through the help of the closing attorney. So if you owe somebody money, it's going to be this recorded interest is going to come up at closing through the attorney, and it's going to be addressed before you take on the property. Now, there are a couple different types of liens. The first type of lien is a specific lien. Specific liens are specific to the property, not the people. They attach to the property. They're pertinent. So if the seller doesn't pay them off for some reason, maybe the attorney didn't do their job, probably not going to happen, but just, what ifs here. The attorney doesn't do their job, the seller doesn't pay them off. The new owner now has their brand new property with your liens. One big benefit of getting an attorney, yes? Have an attorney assist you through the closing process so you can make sure all this is addressed. One specific lien is called the deed of trust. In North Carolina, we're just awfully fancy. The deed of trust is your mortgage. The money you borrow from a bank to buy this home, to buy this property. So that deed of trust is going to be recorded. It's going to be a specific lien. Real property taxes are a specific lien. They attach to the property until they're paid off. Each year, we have property taxes due. Government special assessments are specific liens. We've mentioned special assessments a little bit ago when we were talking about the HOA. Special assessments can come from the HOA, as we discussed. They can also come from the government. Anytime they're trying to make an improvement to the property, they may issue a special assessment. Examples of special assessments by the government might be if they want to install sidewalks or street lighting, or maybe they want to hook a whole neighborhood up to public water and public sewer. They're going to do that with putting some of the cost onto the homeowners that special assessment affects. A mechanics lien is also a specific lien. We're going to talk more about mechanics liens next, so bear with me. And then there's also a specific lien that the North Carolina commercial real estate broker can put on the property to protect their commission. Not residential broker, but the commercial broker may have the opportunity to place a lien. Is the special assessment similar to the HOA? It's all for the improvement of the property. It's just a matter of who is putting that special assessment. HOA's got a special assessment on the condos and the townhomes. The government could have a special assessment on any property owner within their jurisdiction. Real property taxes and government special assessments are referred to as superior liens. Real property taxes and government special assessments are superior liens, meaning they take priority. They are superior. We're going to start talking about something called lien priority. When you go to sell your home, you have all these outstanding liens, you have all these people money. And the question is, who gets paid in what order? And that is defined by lien priority. Superior liens are always paid first. This year's real property taxes, any delinquent taxes, if you didn't pay last year's taxes for some reason, and government special assessments are always paid first. All other liens after that are paid in the order in which they are recorded. So whoever records first gets lien priority. Visualize in your mind, if you will, it's closing day. You're selling your house and it's closing day. Y'all, there are all sorts of people standing there with their hand out, very excited about today. And what we're talking about with lien priority is who gets paid when. So superior liens get paid first. All other liens are paid in the order in which is recorded, except for the mechanics lien. The mechanics lien are just a little bit different. So before we continue this lien priority conversation, let's talk about what this mechanics lien is. The mechanics lien, its purpose is to give security to those that perform labor or furnish materials in the improvement of your real property, RP, real property. So why don't you guys tell us in a chat, when you think of a mechanic, when you think of somebody providing labor or material to your property for the improvement of your property, who is somebody you might think of? What are some examples of who might be that mechanic? Putting a fence up, contractors, plumber, HVAC, electrician, the roofer. General contractors. These are people that you've hired to come on your property and do an improvement. You hired them, they came and they did the job, and you didn't pay them. They have the right to file a lien to give themselves a place in line for a chance to get paid when you close. So the mechanic, the unpaid mechanic, and no amount is not considered. So if you hire a landscaper to put, for $200 to put rose bushes in and you don't pay them, they can file a lien for $200. Don't they have that right? Didn't they bring you rose bushes? Didn't they plant them for you? Don't they have that right to get paid? So that's what we're talking about here with the mechanic. What about something you have a lease on? Becca, that may fall under the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, that we talked about back in Unit 2. Remember addressing those personal property items that you lease and not own. These are things that we're paying for. I've hired you to perform a service or furnish material. You did the job, and now I'm not paying you. They have the right to collect, and they can do so by filing a mechanics lien. In North Carolina, if there's a project that costs more than $30,000, North Carolina requires a lien agent, commonly in the form of a general contractor. A general contractor comes in, they hire their subs. So the general contractor has an electrician and a plumber and a sheetrock guy and a flooring guy and all those guys that come in and do the job. If the project's over $30,000, you're dealing with multiple subcontractors. We're talking like adding a room to the back of the house or finishing the unfinished basement, that kind of thing. So anything over 30,000 needs to have this general contractor, this lien agent, to help facilitate the project. But understand, again, all mechanics have the right to file the lien. May it be the $30,000 project or the $200 rose bushes. Everybody's got the right if you fail to pay them. So you hire somebody, they come in, they do the job, you thank them very much, they go on their way, and you choose not to pay them. Mechanics law, the North Carolina mechanics lien law, says the mechanic has up to 120 days from when they last provided the labor material to file the lien. Probably when you hired this mechanic, you might have signed something agreeing to pay him. The job is done. They send you an invoice. They send you a 30-day invoice. 60-day invoice, right? They may try a couple times to get you to pay. But near day 120 from when they finished, if they want the right to collect, if they want the right to stand in line for lien priority, then they have to file that lien within 120 days of finishing the job. The mechanic also has the right to bring action to enforce. Anybody that you owe money to could start the foreclosure process on you to begin. Now, let's be honest. Mechanics that did the $200 rose bushes, they're probably not in the business of foreclosing on you. It's timely, it's expensive. They're landscapers, right? They got better things to do. I'm not telling you if they're going to do it or not. What I'm telling you is that they have the right. After 180 days after that work was finished, they have the right to bring action to enforce. So here's our timeline. Mechanics have 120 days from when the work ended to file the lien. They have 180 days from when the work ended to bring action to enforce. If they don't do it within these 120 and 180 days, they've lost the right to collect. They've lost the right to foreclose. Does that make sense? If it's day 121 and I didn't file the lien and you didn't pay me, I can keep sending you letters, but I've lost that right to file a lien and hopefully collect when you close. If you are paying monthly, could they still file the lien? No, because you are doing what you guys agreed to do. So could you agree to pay monthly? Sure. What we are saying is that you are totally ignoring this person after they did the work. You've not given them anything. And maybe that's something that they do, Brooke. Maybe they say, okay, I'm not getting a response from you, so how about we work out a payment plan, right? Anything's negotiable, you guys. What we're saying here is that they haven't gotten anything from you. Day 120, by day 120, they file that lien. So back up. We talked about that lien priority. We said superior liens are paid first. All liens after that are paid in the order in which they're recorded. The exception to that is the mechanics lien. The mechanics lien is the only lien not paid in the order in which it's recorded. It's paid in the order, it's retroactive, and your recording date is back to when the work began. What's the day you showed up on site to do the job? That is where your lien priority is. What happens if you never pay it? They file the lien. When you go to sell your house, the closing attorney finds it, and that mechanic will get paid before you do. One of the biggest responsibility of the closing attorney is to make sure when the buyer becomes the owner, they don't have any of the former owner's liens. We're going to get all these paid off. We can only pay them off, though, if they record these liens. So again, it's closing day. Yay, it's closing day. And you're selling your house. And there are all sorts of people standing in line now. You got these lien holders standing in line. Real property taxes and government special assessments are standing there first, which means they will get paid before anybody else. After that, all liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanics lien. The mechanics lien is paid in the order in which the work began. Again, what lien priority does is it tells us who's going to get paid in what order. After lien holders, you're looking at the people that are involved in the settlement, any attorneys, real estate agents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The very last person in that line is the seller. They get whatever's left after everybody else has been paid. I got a couple of financing units, so we're going to get the opportunity to wear a mortgage lender's hat. We're going to talk about some lender terms. So we're going to talk about foreclosures. We're going to talk about short sales. In both of those cases, the seller is underwater. And what I mean by that is they owe more than what they can sell their home for. They have so many lien agents, so many lien holders standing there that by the time they get to the end, the money's run out. And guys, when the money's run out, the money's run out. The only number we have to start with is that sales price. What is the buyer going to pay you for the cost of your home? So hopefully, in most transactions, sellers will pay off their lien holders, and then they'll pay off the people involved in the settlement process, and then their proceeds is whatever's left. 14 and 15 are our financing units. In unit 21, we're going to go to closing. We actually get to go to closing in unit 21. We're going to talk about some numbers, and we're going to determine how much the seller is going to get paid. Good things coming. So lien priority tells us the order in which people get paid. Superior liens get paid first. All other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanics lien. They are paid in the order in which the work began. So put your pencils down for a second. Let's look at an example together. Let's talk something through with mechanics liens. So let me go back. Remember, we said they have 120 days from when the work ended to file the lien. Once they file that lien for lien priority, it's retroactive to when the work began. So let's walk through a few scenarios. Let's say on August 8th, your hot water heater goes out. You call the mechanic comes and fixes your hot water heater all on that day. You say, thank you very much. The mechanic leaves and you never pay them. They send you a couple letters, maybe a few phone calls, but you just decide you're not going to pay them. Now, don't get into semantics with me. I know that each months have different numbers of days, and this is a leap year and da-da-da-da-da. But for, in general purposes, 120 days would be December 8th. So the work was done, began, and ended on August 8th. 120 days later is December 8th. If the mechanic wants to file a lien, they must do so by December 8th. 120 days. If the mechanic wants to bring action to enforce, they must do so by February 8th. This is our timeline. 120 days, 180 days. If they don't file the lien, they've lost the right to file. They've lost the right to collect. Say August is a bad month for you. Your hot water heater goes out. 2 days later, your AC quits. Oh, for goodness sakes. Guy comes out, does the job, finishes it on August 16th. The 120-day clock starts when the work ends. So we finish the job on August 16th. They have until December 16th to file the lien. They have until February 16th to take action to foreclose, bring action to enforce, if that's what they're going to do. I mean, bottom line, let's just pay these guys, right? They gave you hot water and they gave you AC in August, so let's just pay them. But if you don't, these are their options. These are their choices. So the hot water heater guy files the lien on December 1st. The AC guy files the lien on November 20th. Set your chats to private. And tell me in a private chat, based on lien priority and the mechanics lien law, who is going to get paid first? The water guy or the AC guy? Who will get paid first? And of these two in this scenario, who's going to get paid first? It's going to be the hot water guy, because mechanics liens are the only ones not paid in the order in which they were recorded. They were paid in the order in which the work began. Who started the work first? The hot water heater guy. It doesn't matter who recorded first. It's retroactive. Mechanics liens are the only liens not paid in the order in which it was recorded. They're paid in the order in which the work began. Everybody good with the hot water heater guy getting paid first? He was there first, yes? And that's why. So one type of lien, specific liens attached to the property, and they stay with the property until they're paid in full. Another type of lien we have are our general liens. General liens attached to the person. If you have outstanding general liens and you go sell a house, these lien holders are also standing in line. If you have general liens and you go to get a car loan or a loan for anything for that matter, you're not going to be able to get much until you get these guys paid off. General liens follow the people until they're paid off. 120 days is based on when the work began. You have 120 days from when the work began to file the lien. Judgments are issued by a court. So if a judge, do we see the word judge in there? Kind of a play on the word. If you have a judgment, it's a court order. Maybe you have outstanding child support or alimony, for example. You might have a judgment placed on you until you get that paid off. Personal property taxes, we get to pay personal property taxes on the toys. So the cars, the boats, the RV, the jet ski, the motorcycle, the toys. Failure to pay those personal property taxes would fall under general liens. State taxes, somebody's asking about student loans. They may fall under state tax liens or federal or general liens specifically with the person if they're filed. State tax liens are going to be like unpaid income taxes, maybe inheritance tax. You got to pay taxes when you inherit properties. And then federal tax liens, this could be like any unpaid IRS taxes. Specific liens attached to the property. They are specific to 123 Main Street. General liens attached to the person. All liens are paid in the priority in which they're recorded. Superior liens are always paid first. All other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanics lien that's paid in the order in which the work began. Anybody, I'm getting questions, student loans, taxes, judgments, anybody that you owe money to could file a lien. They're just doing it to protect their interest. And guys, remember, lien priority, all we're doing is putting people in order. There's still no guarantee, but I don't know about you guys. If you owed me money, I'd rather be standing in line with my hand out and have a shot than not even have the opportunity to stand here and collect. And that's all they're doing when they file a lien is hopefully, fingers crossed, they're having the opportunity to stand in line and hopefully collect when you go to sell your house. You sell your house for $250,000, you are not going to get a check for $250,000 unless you have zero liens, no agent, no attorney, no fees, nothing. You're not going to get $250,000. Again, how much are you going to get? We're going to talk about that. We're getting there. Yes, general liens, absolutely. Any money you owe at closing, all liens, lien priority, all liens are paid in the order in which they were recorded. Superior liens are always paid first because they're superior. Real property taxes and government special assessments. The mechanics lien is paid in the order in which the work began. So again, write that down. When you see the word lien, play on words. See the word loan. If you have a loan, you owe somebody some money, and that's all we're saying with lien priority. These are the people you owe. And this is a big reason why buyers hire closing attorneys to make sure all this is addressed. Because when a buyer buys, they should be starting with a clean slate. They should be starting new without somebody else's liens. Now let's talk about this mechanics lien for just a second more. Let's say you're getting ready to sell your home and you decide to have some work done. Maybe you have a painter come in and paint, you have new carpet put down, and you have the landscaper come up and give you better curb appeal, right? So you put some money into your home before you sell it. What if you never pay that painter? The home sells fast, as it has been in the last few years. The home sells fast, it closes, and then the mechanic files a lien because they have 120 days from when the work ended to file the lien. So what if you sell your home within 100 days, new owner owns, and then the mechanic files the lien? This new homeowner, unbeknownst to them, has a brand new lien on their brand new property. Another thing we're going to talk about in Unit 5 is something called title insurance. And title insurance is meant to protect the homeowner from things such as that. Title insurance is going to have the seller sign something that says this can't happen. But if they do, and it does, title insurance has the right to go after the former owner to correct this. So could we run into mechanics liens? Could you have a mechanic lien on your property that maybe you didn't know about from the former owner? Sure, because they have that 120-day window. So title insurance, think about what insurance does. It protects you if something bad happens, right? And that's the same thing as title insurance. It's going to protect you if something bad happens to your title. Somebody says, if we're going to list a house, is our lien something we ask about? Yes, we do. And as a matter of fact, our listing agreement that I use between myself and the seller asks, what are your outstanding liens? What are your approximate balances? Because I, as your agent, want to know what we're getting into. So absolutely. Could they do a personal lien on the ex-homeowner? That's a call your attorney question. That's a good one. That'd be a great place to start. But before you call that attorney, you're calling the attorney because you have title insurance. And that's what title insurance does. Again, more on that in Unit 5. What if the previous owner can't pay? Title insurance are more than likely, they're there to protect you. So they're going after the previous owner. And if they're dead or broke or MIA, then they're going to cover you because that's what insurance does. Mechanics lien is not paid in the order in which it was recorded. It was paid in the order in which the work began. Do you want to need attorneys involved? My goodness, this just gets, this is why we have attorneys involved. If you're a lien agent for 30,000 or more, you lose priority. No, if you have that 30,000, that contractor for 30,000 or more, you're still a mechanic. But now, like I said, you got all those subs. The only reason we need to care about that 30,000 is because that's a magic number of when you need the lien agent, when you need the general contractor to come in and facilitate that project. But again, any mechanic that you owe money to has the right to file the lien. They have the right to collect. It's only fair. They gave you a service. They improved your property. They deserve to be paid. And that's all they're doing is protecting their interests. So more on recording, more on the closing attorney's process. All that's coming in Unit 5. Liens are encumbrances because they affect the title. The seller's biggest responsibility is to convey clear marketable title subject to 0 liens. So they encumber the property until they're paid in full. The only way to get rid of a lien is pay them off. Another encumbrance, something else that encumbers or affects title to property, are any deed restrictions. These things have several different names. Covenants is really what we're looking for here. That's the common theme. So you may hear our homeowners associations, restrictive covenants, CCRs, protective covenants. Covenants are just kind of like the rules put on the property by a homeowners association. These are private agreements. When you buy in an HOA, you know what you're buying. Hopefully you're seeing these covenants before you buy. We're going to talk a whole lot more about covenants when we get to Unit 6. For right now, let's just know that covenants are an encumbrance. They affect the title. Covenants are appurtenant, which means they run with the land. These covenants that we speak of are again recorded in the public records where anybody can access. Covenants are created by the developer when they create the subdivision. We're going to talk about subdivision creation and a little bit about that process. Once the developer is done, once they've built the last home in the subdivision and they've left and gone on to the next development, the covenants remain because they're pertinent. So the developer creates them, sets them up. People are either for or against HOAs. Again, it's a personal preference. We'll talk more about these, but the purpose should be to preserve the value, the standards of the subdivision. Some people don't want to live next door to the house that has cars up on cinder blocks. Being in an HOA may have covenants that address you not doing that. Some people don't want to live in a neighborhood where you can paint your house any color you want. Being in an HOA may prevent that. All covenants are different. All we can do as agents is help our buyers get their hands on the covenants so they can look over them and decide, is this what I want or not? I'm a fact finder. I help gather the facts so you can make an informed decision. And giving you the covenants is something as a buyer's agent that I need to help you do so you can, again, look it over. More on that. Another encumbrance, something else that encumbers the property. Here's your Latin lesson for the day. Lis pendens is Latin for pending litigation. This is recorded also down in the public records. If there's a pending litigation on the property, think of this as a legal stop. They're warning potential buyers, don't buy this property. There's some kind of lawsuit going on. And depending on the outcome of this lawsuit, it may or may not be the sellers to sell. It's a legal stop. Don't you buy this property until the outcome of this lawsuit. What we're trying to do with a lis pendens is prevent the shady seller from trying to sell it out from underneath the lawsuit. So again, buyers, you hire your closing attorney. Closing attorney searches the public records. They find this lis pendens, and the closing attorney says, not until we have this lawsuit resolved. Another encumbrance is called a writ of attachment. Another legal stop. Now the courts have seized the property. They just still may be in the process. Once that gavel comes down and the judge takes your property, it starts the process. It doesn't happen overnight. So the judge or the judge is taking the property, it's still in the process, and it's just a legal warning. Don't buy this property. The courts are in the process of taking it. Another encumbrance are our easements. We've probably heard about easements. Question comes in, when are covenants created? When the developer creates the subdivision. Easements are permission to use your property. They don't own it. They have no ownership interest. They just have an easement, which means they have a legal right to use your property. I don't know many properties that don't have some type of easement on it. How many of you guys like water, electricity, Google fiber optics? Yes, we got to have some kind of easement for the power company to run their poles and their wires to give me electricity. We got to have an easement for the water company to run their pipes to give me an easement. Not many properties don't have, not unless you're off the grid, you've got your own water, your own electricity, right? Not many properties don't have some type of easement. There are two types of easements that we're going to talk about. The first type of easement is an appurtenant easement. What does this easement do? It runs with the land. It's appurtenant. So it's going to convey from one owner to the next. Real quick, guys, question comes in. Lis pendens and the writ of attachment, two different things. Lis pendens means you have a pending litigation, a pending trial. Writ of attachment means it's been resolved. The court is in the process of seizing the property. So an appurtenant easement means it's an easement that runs with the land. Appurtenant easement involves two and only two tracts of land. Tracts of adjacent land, side by side. Appurtenant easement is not about three pieces of land. It's not about two pieces that don't touch. Appurtenant easements is two adjacent lots, two different owners. This easement is appurtenant on both tracts. With appurtenant easements, the two tracts of lands have names. There's one tract of land that the easement runs over, known as the servient tenement. The other tract is the dominant tenement. One is doing the using, the other one is being used. More often than not, as an example, where these things come to play, let's say you own a piece of land. And the land runs parallel to the road. And one day you wake up and you decide you're going to subdivide your land. You can't landlock somebody. In other words, you cannot sell this tract of land to somebody else. We'll call this owner B. You cannot sell this tract of land to somebody else and tell them they can't come or go off the land. Egress and ingress. You cannot stop somebody. You can't landlock them. So you own this piece of land, you subdivide it, split it in two, and a appurtenant easement is going to have to be created so this person can get to the road. This is probably the most common place where we see this appurtenant easement. In this case, owner B is the dominant tenement because they are the one using the land. Owner A is going to be the servient because their land is being used. You see this little piece of the driveway right here that allows you to access, come and go from your land? Who owns that piece of the driveway that you're driving on? Owner A, right? You're driving over A's land to get to the land. So who owns it? A. Who's responsible for maintenance? A. Who gets to pay taxes on it? A. They are the ones being used. B in this case is doing the using. They're the ones that are driving over. Now, can A go knock on B's door and say, hey, our driveway needs to be repaired, all these potholes? I mean, you can always ask, right? but there's no requirement of owner B to participate in that. So pertinent easement, there's a good picture in your books, page 57. Again, same thing. For whatever reason, B can't access the road. Maybe those trees are protected. Maybe they're a type of zoning that we're going to talk about in Unit 6. Maybe they're protected and they can't be torn down to build a driveway. So the only way that B can get on and off a public road is by crossing over A's land. One party is being used, another party is doing the using. Not getting off easements, but kind of getting off easements just for a second. We mentioned party walls a few minutes ago. You may also have a shared driveway. They may not necessarily be in a pertinent easement, but anything shared like that is going to have that idea. Both are going to be responsible for it. In this case, these guys got a shared driveway and they got a party wall in their garage. So if anything happens to the driveway, if anything happens to that party wall, then both are going to be responsible for whatever it needs to fix it for the upkeep and the maintenance. With the appurtenant easement, the servient tenement owns the property, they're responsible for it. They just have to allow somebody else to access it, somebody else to drive over it, for example. So remind me, the appurtenant easement affects how many tracts of land? 2. Always 2 and only 2. Everybody good? And they got to be adjacent. They got to be touching. The other type of easement we have, there's a pertinent easement, and then there's the easement in gross. Easement in gross could affect one homeowner. It could affect thousands of homeowners. With an easement in gross, there's no dominant. It's just one person asking permission or one entity asking permission to use the property. I think the most common easement in gross that we have is the commercial easement in gross. Think of Duke Power Company, R&R Railroad. If you have, or if Duke Power has power lines over your property, they have an easement in gross. They have permission to come access those power lines. If R&R Railroad has an easement in gross, you may have train tracks running in the back of your property line. You can't go out there and stop that train from coming on your property, can you? Please don't try to do that. They have permission through the easement in gross, the commercial easement in gross, to bring their tracks over your property. Now, this is handled in the courts. It's not like R&R Railroad is going to come knock on your door and ask permission. This is all handled in the courts. Same thing with Duke Power, for example. It's all handled in the courts. Duke Power and R&R in these examples would be the easement owners. So if Duke Power dies, Duke Power is selling to another power company. That other power company doesn't have rights to the easement unless it's hashed out in the sale. Now, let's face it, somebody buying Duke Power Company comes with really good attorneys. And they're going to make sure that when they buy Duke Power Company, they are also acquiring Duke's easements. Again, you and I don't have to worry about the new power company getting an easement. They'll get it. It just comes through the courts. Every once in a while, it pops up on the news where somebody gets upset because the power company came on their property to take care of their equipment. You don't have the right to be on my land. Well, actually they do, because they have that easement. They have that permission to be there. The other easement in gross could be a personal easement in gross. Again, these are not appurtenant. They don't run with the land. A personal easement and gross. Let's say on my property, I have a really nice pond. And I have a buddy that wants to come fish on my pond, but they don't want to ask me permission every time. Whenever they wake up and they decide they want to go fishing today, they just want to come do it. They may request a personal easement and gross, which permanently gives them permission to come fish on my pond. You can't revoke it during your lifetime. Now, if the owner passes away or if they sell the property, then that personal easement and gross will not continue on. So we mean when we say it's not appurtenant. So I've had my buddy fishing on my pond for years and years and years. Now I sell the property. My buddy no longer has rights to come fish on that pond. If they do, that's called trespassing because that personal easement and gross goes away with it. So these are not appurtenant. They're only for the life of the easement owner. Who has the permission to use the property? Is it my buddy fishing on my pond? Is it Duke Power? This easement is only good for their life. Again, another good picture of your book, page 58. You got our easement and gross in the back, and there's our power lines. It obviously affects A more than B, but doesn't it still affect B? You can't go out there and deny them from coming and working on those power lines. And yes, when you buy a property, you know, it all comes out in that closing with that attorney. Actually, when you see the property, you're probably going, huh, are those train tracks back there? Does that affect me? But the attorney will help us discover those. So again, two different easements. A pertinent easement affects 2 tracts of land. Easement and gross could affect 1. It could affect thousands. It's permission to use somebody else's land. That's all an easement is.
Julie, I have a question.
Somebody else's land. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay. You said the easement is for the lifetime of the person. What if if that person dies, pertinence? If that person dies and his land is now his kids, do they have right to go fishing too, or does it have to be redone with the specific person?
Personal easement is just for you.
Okay.
And when that person dies, the easement owner has died, and that will terminate the easement. Question comes in, does we as realtors have to disclose these to buyers? Yes. We have to disclose everything we know. We're going to talk about our disclosure laws. We're going to talk about how we can find out all this information to disclose, what we have to disclose, but absolutely disclose, disclose, disclose. How do we know? Well, as buyer's agents, we're helping our buyers do research. We're helping them look into the property, learn about the property. And we'll talk about the buyer's process, but let me just go ahead and say that the contract to closing process for the buyer, they're spending much of that time learning as much about the property as they possibly can. So not only the property itself, but the things that affect the property, such as easements, for example.
I just want to make sure that I understand the appurtenant easement, like the example that we went over. So if the owner of Lot A were to sell, the next person to purchase it, the real estate agent would have to disclose that you have to be okay with the person that owns Lot B using your driveway?
That's right.
Right?
Because it is appurtenant.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep. You know, for a real life example, you guys, that picture I just drew, I showed Lot B once. It was one of my teammates' buyers, but he was busy, so I showed it for him. And yeah, we stood there and explained. So you know that dirt, because that driveway was dirt and potholes, and I mean, your car was like doing this, just trying to get to it. You know, it was in bad shape. And when we got to the property, the buyers were like, God, that driveway is awful. And I'm like, so here's the deal about the driveway. Now, in that case, B bought that piece of the land from A. A agreed to sell that portion of the land. And that way A doesn't have to worry about it. Now B's got a bumpy driveway, right? So things can be worked out in that case, like when we sell, they didn't have to buy, but in that case, they chose to. Now that B bought that driveway, who's responsible for those potholes? B. Who gets to pay taxes on that driveway? B. It's all theirs now. We just redrew the line. Had they not, that easement driveway would still be there because it's appurtenant. You can never landlock somebody. Even when you sell 5 times, you still cannot landlock somebody. You cannot prevent somebody from coming or going, ingress or egress. Is it your responsibility to knock on A's door and ask if they'd be willing to sell? No, B and A had already hashed this out. B's owner had already hashed this out. They said, if they want to buy it, let them buy it. Is it my responsibility to go ask? No. Could B go ask? Sure. I'm helping B buy the property. Like I said, they had already come to that agreement before we ever showed up. So that was nice. That was nice. We could tell B, if you buy and you want, I can't make anybody do anything, right? So I couldn't make them buy the driveway, but all we could do was tell them that it was available. So easements, all it is permission to use somebody else's land. May it be appurtenant, may it be an easement in gross, have your power poles or R&R railroad, etc. Okay. Break time. Let's take our last break. We come back. I got a little bit more to say about easements. So we come back from break. What if the owner refuses to fix the driveway? Well, they don't have to. So what is B's rights? They don't have any because they don't own anything. So if A won't fix it, then B just has to grumble. Or maybe they offer to go in 50-50 with them, right? I mean, we can maybe work something out. But as far as them refusing, they don't have to. All right, so let's take 10. We come back. Like I said, I got a little bit more to say about easements. So when we come back, we'll finish that up. Welcome back. I'm going to go ahead and take attendance. And let's continue our conversation with easements. And in order to do that, I need to go off book just for 1 second. And the reason I'm going off book is because we're going to introduce you to a couple terms that we're going to see several different times in this class. We're going to see it first when talking about easements. We're going to see it come up when we talk about agency. So we need to step back for just a second and make sure that we understand these terms. The terms I want to introduce you to is express versus implied. If something is expressed, what I'm telling you is that the terms of the agreement have been clearly stated. Maybe that was in writing, maybe that was orally, maybe that was verbally, but we explained the terms of the agreement. If you compare that to something that's implied, we didn't explain it. It was just based on our actions. So we're going to see express and implied several different times in this course, starting on the next slide. So again, I think it's helpful to kind of just back up for a second and make sure we have the basis of these words as we're going to see them time and time again. I have taken attendance. So if you're just coming back, you'll shoot me a quick chat so we can make sure we count you here this hour. So something that's expressed means that the terms have been clearly stated. If something's implied, we've not stated the term. We just started acting like we had this conversation. We just started acting like it happened. So now let's bring this into our easement discussion. How we create easements can be created one of three ways. Easements can be created expressly, which means somebody has given you oral or written permission. Somebody has given you that oral or written easement. Big picture, you guys. If you got oral, you don't have anything when it comes to an easement. The only way to make this easement stick is to get it in writing. If you have it in writing, now you have something that you can record, something that you can make public records. When we talk about oral or written terms, we're just saying how it's communicated, how it's expressed. An implied easement is an easement by necessity. The implied easement is what we were talking about earlier with being landlocked. It's implied that you can't stop somebody from coming or going. So it might be that an easement is not created verbally, but it has to be created because people can't be landlocked. So it's created by necessity. Again, that plot of land that we subdivided. And then the other way easements can be created is by operation of law. The judge could create an easement. Let's say you've been using somebody's property for a period of time, for example, 20 years. And then all of a sudden the owner says, whoa, you can't be here. You can't use my property. You say, you know what? I've been doing this for 20 years. Stop me. The two go to court, and the judge could say, since you've been using it all this time with no problem, I'm going to create an easement, and I'm going to give you permanent permission to use this land. Remember, an easement is just permission to use somebody else's land. When we get to Unit 5, we're going to take this operation of law easement, we're going to take it a step further. And we're going to learn, not only could the judge give somebody an easement that's been using your land for 20 years, in Unit 5, we're going to learn that somebody could be given your land if they've been using it for 20 years. So with the easement, we're just given permission. Easements can also be terminated. If the cessation of purpose no longer exists, let's say, for example, you have land with numerous of acres, and on your acres is a lot of timber, and somebody wants to come harvest your timber. They want your trees on your land. You could give them an easement to come and go off your land to harvest your timber. Yes, they're paying you money. Yes, this is handled in court with attorneys. Once they cut down the last tree, the easement's going to terminate. They have no reason to use that easement when they have nothing to timber. So cessation of purpose, merger of parcels. Remember our subdivided lot? We had our lot, and then we had lot A and lot B. At some point, A could decide to buy B, which would terminate that easement. If you merge the parcels, if one person now owns both, there's no need for an easement. They have the road right there. They don't need that easement. You could release the rights of the easement, or if it's just abandoned, if it's not being used. Again, the courts may need to weigh in on this. But if things change, if the property lines change, then that may be time to revisit these easements. And in the end, they could be terminated. Questions on our easements? Most things in this unit are encumbrances. There's only one thing in this unit that's not. And the thing in this unit that's not an encumbrance are licenses. Compare licenses to that personal easement in gross. Again, Buddy wants to come fish on your pond. They want permanent permission to do so. You pretty much got two choices. Either you give them a personal easement in gross, which cannot be revoked, which cannot be terminated until the easement owner dies or the property is sold, conveyed. A license, though, is not an easement. It can be revoked. So if you give your buddy a license to come fish on your pond, and then you get mad at them for some reason, you can take that back. Kind of less risk for the homeowner, right? You're not locked in for as long as you own the property. So when you're looking at license, again, I don't get bogged down on this, but when you're looking at license, compare that best to a personal easement in gross. This can be revoked. The personal easement in gross cannot. Once the personal easement in gross has been established, it's there until we either don't own the property or the easement owner passes away. Another encumbrance on the property is an encroachment. These are bad. As a matter of fact, these are so bad, they even have the word roach built right into them. Ew. So encroachments, your improvement, your property goes over the property line onto your neighbors. You have some kind of improvement, may it be a garage. Probably the number one encroachment we run into is the fence. Maybe it's a shed, but a piece of your improvement extends to the neighboring lot. It crosses the property line. The only way to truly discover an encroachment is through a survey. Now we're going to talk about the survey and the surveyor when we get to Unit 4 on Thursday. So we'll talk more about what that means. But the surveyor is the one that come out and identify the property lines. And if they identify the property line and they see that improvement encroaching, they see that improvement going over, then this is something that needs to be addressed before we can change the deed, before that deed can change hands. because that encroachment can affect both titles. So let's talk about the fence. I'm telling you guys right now, the only thing you know by looking at a fence is that somebody put a fence there. You cannot look at a fence and assume it's within the property lines. Guys, fencing companies will put a fence up. They don't require surveys. If the homeowner wants to have one done, that's up to them. But the fencing company's job is to come in and install the fence where you tell them to. They assume you know your property lines. Blows my mind how many people save money by not having a survey done, not knowing their property lines, and say, oh yeah, just put the fence up over there. So when you see that fence, you can't assume anything. You don't know that they're within the lines or not. As buyer's agents, we are always going to encourage our buyers to have a survey done, because if something like that fence comes up as an encroachment, then the closing attorney needs to get with the seller to get that addressed before settlement, before that deed changes hands. And the only two ways I know of to deal with an encroachment is either take that portion of the fence down, rebuild that portion of the fence, or create an easement. Give that fence permission to be there. This could come down to the two owners now, the two that has the encroachment. What we need to know is when an encroachment is discovered in a survey, we got our closing attorney involved, and they're going to have to make it right. Otherwise, you got both titles unmarketable, which could make either one of them not sellable. So if we look at this picture of an encroachment, I mean, this is a heck of an encroachment right here. The red line is the property owner's line. This big building, some kind of building. You see this whole piece right here that's over the red line. That's the encroachment. This person's improvement is on this person's property. These are really, really bad. Again, more on surveys, more on that fence. We'll talk about that fence a little bit more. Yeah.
Does it matter how long it's been there without the owner noticing?
No. Yeah, and you know, Becca, it might be a case, these two guys have lived next door to each other for the last 20, 30 years. And it's not a problem until the new guy shows up, right? And now we got the new owner who may go knock on this guy's door and say, yeah, your shed's on my property, get it off. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't a problem with these two, but now we got the new guy in. And I think that's the way it goes most often. Again, buyers can try to head this off a little bit by having that survey done, have this identified, and have it addressed with the attorney, with the help of the attorney, have this addressed prior to closing. So then that way this is a non-issue when you buy.
Okay.
The last encumbrance we're going to talk about in this unit are taxes, property taxation laws. All properties in the state of North Carolina are subject to annual real property taxes. The joys of homeownership, yes? In North Carolina, we use what's called ad valorem property taxes. Ad valorem just means of market value. Of market value. Market value for tax purposes is set for the tax value of that property. It's not what it's worth. It's not what it can sell for. It's the market value for tax purposes. Tax, market value, closing price, listing price, none of those are the same, usually. So ad valorem just means of market value. And in North Carolina, we express our tax rate as an amount per 100. And we'll see this again when we pick up our calculator in just a few minutes. The tax rate is set annually by the local governing body. So you got your county taxes, you have your city taxes, maybe you have school board taxes, maybe you have fire district taxes. You have different tax rates, and each properties are different. In North Carolina, all properties are located in a county. We have 100 counties in our state. All properties are located within a county. However, in order to be subject for city taxes, you got to be in the city limits. If you're outside the city limits, you're not subject to city taxes. So everybody's going to pay county taxes. What else you pay is going to depend on your district. It's going to depend on where you live. We have something called the North Carolina Machinery Act. And what the Machinery Act does, taxation is a very local event. The local government can set their own taxes. However, the Machinery Act kind of puts a ceiling on it. They say you guys are free to set the tax rates and set your tax values for whatever you want, but you can't go over this limit. It keeps it reasonable. We don't want greedy tax collectors. So it sets a ceiling, says you can do whatever you want, and that's what the Machinery Act does for it. And the reason it's a problem topic is because the Machinery Act doesn't sound like it has anything to do with taxes. So I would write that Machinery Act is about tax regulation. And what this does is it sets the standards. Again, it sets the ceiling for real property taxes, different tax assessments, the appraisal process, talk a little bit more about those. And then it may also allow for tax exempt status. You may have certain properties that are subject to lower taxes or no taxes. So for example, nonprofits, maybe a reduced tax rate for seniors, for example. So for tax purposes, the county will perform an assessment on the property to determine what the tax value is. The tax value helps us determine how much taxes will be this year. Where are my homeowners on the call? Homeowners in the state of North Carolina. Did you guys get your letter already? Got your tax letter? They want you to list your personal property taxes. Has anything changed from last year? I mean, I got mine on like January 3rd. They don't waste any time, do they? New year, new tax law, let's go, you know? So you personal or homeowners, you got your letter. What they're trying to do right now is figure out taxes for this year. We'll look at a taxation timeline in just a second. So the assessment value is trying to help the taxing authority determine the value for tax purposes. And like we said, in North Carolina, ad valorem taxes are of market value. Other states, their tax assessed value may be less than market value. For your exams, for your practice questions, if they want you to use true market value, they'll let you know. If they want you to use something less than market value, they'll let you know. You're going to look at one or the other, but never both. So we got to read the problem and always, this is important, always do what the problem tells you. So if the problem tells you to use something less than market value, then that's what I want you to do. So ad valorem, our tax rate is an amount per 100. Again, you're going to see that again in just a second. Before we see that though, other states may use something called a mill rate. North Carolina ad valorem is an amount per 100. Mill rate is 1/1000th. How they determine that tax rate. So if we're told that the tax rate is 15 mills, all we do is take 15 divided by 1,000. And now we have a rate of 0.015. In other words, North Carolina, we divide by 100. Mill rate states divide by 1,000. So just a nice side-by-side comparison. In North Carolina, ad valorem taxes, something per 100. Our assessed value is true market value, 100% of market value. Other states, and I don't know specific what other states, before your exams, if they want you to use the mill rate, they'll let you know. If they want you to use ad valorem, they'll let you know. One or the other, never both. And then in other states, the assessed value for tax purposes may be less than market value. So everybody turn with me, Will, please, in your book to page 65. You don't have to write this down because you have this in your book on page 65. And what we're looking at on page 65 is the taxation timetable. So January 1st of every year, a tax lien is filed. They did not waste any time this year. Tax lien is filed on the property. Happy New Year. We all now owe taxes on our homes this year. Great way to start the year. Yes? Hang on to that January 5th date for 1 second. I'll come back to that. Further down our taxation timetable, the new tax rate is set on July 1st. So again, here we are. I have a tax lien filed on my property, but I don't even know yet what the new rate for the year is going to be. This is what we mean by they're still gathering that information. They sent you your letter for your personal property taxes. They're still trying to set the rate for this year. They got to set the rate by July 1st. The tax bill doesn't get sent out until August, and this year's taxes are not due until September 1st. On our taxation timetable, this is $2024. This January 5th date is January 5th, 2025. Failure to pay this year's taxes by January 5th, 2025 means that your taxes are delinquent and they start collecting interest. So the tax rate is set in July. The bill comes out, taxes are due and payable on September 1st of this year. Failure to pay taxes by January 5th, 2024, nope, 2025 next year, means that you are delinquent and interest starts accruing. If you did not pay this year's taxes and next year you go to sell your house, the closing attorney will pull a link, will pull a public records, and it will come up as an outstanding lien. And remember, real property taxes and superior liens and government special assessments, excuse me, are superior liens. So if you're delinquent on any taxes, when you go to sell your property, those are going to get paid first. Questions on our taxation timetable? Everything's 2024, but that January 5th date. And make a note in your book so we see.
I see it says last year's tax must be paid, but it has a date of 2025. Could you say that for me one more time?
If you don't pay this year's taxes by January 5th, 2025, they're delinquent.
Thank you.
And interest starts accruing. And I don't know what interest is, but I imagine it's not cheap. So the tax rate is set every year. The tax rate changes every year. The rate can adjust to help support the government functions. You know, they set a budget at the beginning of each year. And what do we need to perform the government functions for this year? And part of those functions can be found by determining a new tax rate every year. The assessed value, the assessed tax value of the property is not done every year. The assessed value is typically reassessed every 8 years. The rate changes every year. The tax value can be reassessed every 8 years. In North Carolina, we use something called a octennial reappraisal. Octennial is 8. The taxing authority has the option to do a horizontal adjustment on the assessed value every 4 years. A horizontal adjustment is a 0.25% across the board to 0.25 increase. You know, when they're doing the octennial reappraisal, they look at the values of the properties in this area, the city, this county. How has it changed in the last 8 years? How do we adjust the assessed value so it's more accommodating to that tax value now? Again, the horizontal adjustment, they don't really study anything. They don't really look at anything. They just issue a flat across the board increase or decrease, but let's be honest, it's almost always an increase. But they have the option to do that horizontal adjustment, but they will do an octennial reappraisal. So again, like we just said, the assessed value for taxes is not the same as what the property is worth if you were going to sell it. Those two numbers are totally different. When we talk about the assessed value for taxes, we're just talking about for taxation purposes. So to just kind of reiterate that, the appraiser offers their opinion of value when you go to sell your home. When a buyer's going to buy your home and they're getting a loan, an appraisal is required so we can get opinion of value to see what the property is worth right here, right now. The assessment property for tax value is a different valuation process. Determining value to buy or sell to originate a loan is different. We're going to talk about the appraisal in Unit 17. More on that. We mentioned special assessments earlier, government special assessments. So again, that's a local taxing body. Maybe it's city, maybe it's county. But the government special assessment is for public improvements made to the property. Are they trying to install sidewalks or street lighting or hook a whole neighborhood up to public water and public sewer? The government's going to issue that special assessment. And as we also said earlier, our government special assessments are superior liens. We talk about that lien priority. So real property taxes, current and delinquent, get paid first. Government special assessments get paid next, if any. All other liens after that are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanics lien is paid in the order in which the work began. So here is, any questions so far?
Could you go back to the slide before this just briefly? Thank you.
So we're going to start on our first piece of real math tonight. We probably won't get through it, which is good because we can introduce you to it tonight, get started on it, and then wherever we end tonight is where we'll pick up tomorrow. Before we leave today, not tomorrow, but the next time I see you guys. Before we leave today, we'll talk about what we're going to do on Thursday. But to introduce you to our first piece of math, I give you guys options here, and I suggest one or the other. The T-bar or the three formulas. I'm saying the same thing in the T-bar that I am the three formulas below. Again, you got choices. You can either work with me and get the T-bar, or you got to memorize those three formulas down there at the bottom. No matter what route you're going, I think all formulas, may it be the T-bar or may it be those three formulas, all formulas need to go on flashcards. Or take a piece of paper in your notebook right now, title it formulas, and every time we come across a math formula, add it to that piece of paper. So at the end, you have all the formulas in one place. I do not have a piece of paper with all the formulas in one place that I can hand you. I don't think that that serves you any good. You need to somehow memorize these formulas. Knowing the formulas, you guys, is like 80% of the battle. If you don't know the formulas, you don't know what to do. You don't know how to do these math problems. So you got choices. I do give the T-bar a shot. You never know. So the T-bar that we're looking at our annual tax bill as part of the tax assessed value. And where does the rate or percent always go? In the bottom right. So this case, we're dealing with the tax rate. Is it ad valorem, something per 100? Or is it a mil, 1/1000th? The problem has to tell you. So the annual tax bill, what you owe this year, is part of the tax assessed value. And we use the tax rate to help us determine that. So like we said a few minutes ago, reiterate what we've said. Property taxes are calculated one of two ways. In North Carolina, we use ad valorem, and the tax rate is something per 100. So for example, if the problem tells you that the city tax rate is 0.73 per $100, in this case, that word per, you guys want another trick to help you read math problems? This word per, in many cases, is a fancy word for divide. So if you take that tax rate of 0.73, divide it by 100, we now have a tax rate of 0.0073 that I can plug in my T-bar. My T-bar does not allow me to put 0.73 per 100. I need an actual number I can put in there. So sometimes we may have to do some work to get to the T-bar. Sometimes once we use the T-bar, we may still have another step or two to take. But the T-bar can be a good tool when we're dealing with rate or percent. So to get a number for the T-bar, in North Carolina, the tax rate is something per 100. And they've got to tell you the something. Because every county, every city, every school board, every fire district are all different across the state. So they got to tell you. So that's how North Carolina ad valorem looks. Tax rate per 100. The other way we can calculate taxes, as we mentioned, and other states use that mil. And a mil is just 1/1000th. So if they tell you 17 mils to find the tax rate, to find something to put in our T-bar, then we just take 17, divide it by 1,000, and that gives me a number I can put in the bottom right. ad valorem, something per 100, or mill, something per 1,000. Never both. One or the other, and just do what the problem tells you. You guys love to argue with a problem. Y'all blow my, it's amazing how you guys can argue with a problem. And you guys will see mill and you'll say, that's other states. We're in North Carolina. I hear you and I appreciate what you're saying. Just do what the problem tells you. All the math in your exam is on the national section. There is no state specific math. So you could come across ad valorem. You could come across mill. Is everybody good with that? Just do what the problem tells you. Don't start the habit of arguing with the problem. If you already have, stop it. If you haven't started yet, don't.
Do you mind going back just for a second? The previous slide missed something real quick.
Guys, remember all my PowerPoints are in the online learning system, and we're recording.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, what is the opposite of divide? Multiply. So what if they're giving you the rate of 0.017 and they want to know what the mill is? Well, if you divided by 1,000 to get the rate, to go backwards, to go the other way, you would just multiply. So again, when do I divide? When do I multiply? I'm telling you, if dividing doesn't work out for you, try multiplying, see what you get. If multiplying is not working, try divide. Sometimes you just got to play with the numbers until something sticks. But the rate is 0.017. The mill is 17. And we can get to it back and forth by, in this case, multiplying by 1,000. Questions so far? Okay, so this is how we do. We're going to do some math. Again, we're not going to get through all these tonight, which is good. We'll do a few together. Are you genuinely as excited as I am? Or are you just, where are my fellow math nerds? Come on, I'm not alone. Thank you guys. Those of you adamantly shaking your head, no, it's okay. It's okay. We'll get you through it. We'll get you through it. Guys, remember a couple things as we officially introduce you to math. I'm not preparing you guys to take a math test. I'm preparing you to take a real estate exam with some math in it. So everybody take a big deep breath with me. We're not taking a math test. Is that good news? Thank you, Julie. Okay. With that being said, yes, your real estate exams do have some math. The math in your exams alone can't fail you. In other words, there's not so many math questions that if you get them all wrong, you're not going to pass. However, if you can use some of the math to help you in those areas of weakness, remember unit 2 and you only made like a 68%? Maybe if you can get some of the math and that kind of balance that a little bit. And that's what we want, your stronger areas to balance your less than stronger areas. So when we do math together in class, generally speaking, we'll work a problem or two together. And then I will let you guys work a problem or two together that we'll come back and talk about. I will show you where you can find practice, not only in the book, but also in the online learning system. And then we've got to move on. The truth is we could spend a lot more time on math than what we do. But also the truth is the math alone can't fail you. So I want to introduce you to the math. I want to show you how to do the math. And then I got to turn you loose. Because quite frankly, watching me do the math, I make it look really easy. The true test is, can you do it on your own? And that's why we provide plenty of practice for you guys. But you've got to practice. If you do this math today and then you don't touch it again until March 1st, it's going to be like starting all over. So this is why we give you those worksheets and those exercises. So we're going to do a couple problems together. I don't know if I'll turn you loose tonight. We'll probably just do a few together, and then I'll probably let you guys, we'll start with you guys doing math tomorrow night. Or I keep saying tomorrow. But you guys know I mean Thursday, right? Please don't try to log on to my Zoom call tomorrow night. I'm not here. But when I say tomorrow, Thursday. When we see a math problem, when we see any problem for that matter, the first thing I want you to do is just read. Just read the problem and ask yourself, what is the question asking me? Once you've just read, put your pencil down, sit on your hands if you have to. But once you've read the question, then you go back through, pick up your pencil, pick up your calculator, and start working it through, start working it out. When you think you have an answer, I want you to go back and read the problem again to make sure that the answer that you have is the answer that they're looking for. For example, let's go back to the T-bar that we jotted down for taxes. The number on top is our annual tax rate. Did everybody write that down? Annual tax rate. Be very careful because you may come across a problem that asks what's the monthly tax rate, which means we first have to find the annual, solve the T-bar and find the annual. And then when we have that number, we got to take it a step further and divide by 12. How many months in a year? 12. I'd be willing to bet if the problem asks you for monthly taxes, I can almost guarantee you that the annual number will be an answer choice. And if you don't go back and read that problem for the third time, you got it wrong. Not because you don't know what you're doing, but because you didn't take that last step and divide it by 12. So everybody promise me that you're going to read these questions carefully. And when you're done, you're going to go back and make sure the answer that you have is in fact the one that they're looking for. Everybody promise me? Pinky swears? Everybody promise me? Okay. All right. So let's do, we only got like 10 minutes. So we'll get through like one or two of these together. And then tomorrow night, we'll turn you loose and let you do a few on your own. So the problem said, calculate the annual property tax due for a property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of $285,000, and an assessed value of $250,000. I've read the problem. I may not know what else I'm doing, but I saw the word rate or percent, and that's pretty much all I need to see to know that at some point I can use a T-bar. Rate or percent always goes where? Bottom right. I'm going to have y'all dreaming about that tonight, I hope, right? Rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So that's one we can figure out first. So we know my tax rate of 1.01. We said that word per is a fancy word for divide. So on your calculators, you take 1.01 divided by 100. I get a rate of 0.0101. And that's what goes in the bottom right. The problem is asking me for, again, staying focused on what the question's asking. The problem is asking me for the annual property taxes. Well, we know our formula, and we know when we're using the T-bar, that annual property taxes is the number on top. Then I have a market value of 285, and I have an assessed value of 250. Go back to your formula. What does the formula tell you to use? The assessed value. Why do we need to know those formulas? Because that tells us of these two numbers, what goes in here. This market value is called a distractor. And a distractor's job is to distract you. How do you beat the distractors? You know the formula. We know our formula of annual property taxes as part of assessed value. Knowing the formula is 80% of the battle. Put that on a flashcard tonight, please. Up, down line, and the T-bar means multiply. So we take 250,000 tax value times 1.0101. And I get annual taxes of $2,525. I took my assessed value. If you're a formula person, I took my assessed value times my tax rate to get my annual property taxes. When you guys are taking both my exam and your state exam, they're on the computer. So you're not going to be able to highlight, mark up like I just did. However, you guys have scratch paper for both. So if making a note on your notebook, you know, this question is asking me about, or your scratch paper, this question is asking me annual property taxes. If that helps you focus and eliminate those distractors, whatever you have to do to keep what the question is asking you, because that's all you care about. If the information doesn't get you to the annual property taxes, I don't care about it. So whatever you have to do to keep that in mind. So the assessed value is what the property has been appraised for the year for taxes. The market value is what it should be listed for. Maybe. I'm going to say, Corey, that depends. Hang on to that. We're going to address that throughout the class. But right now, we're just going to focus on the assessed value for taxation purposes. Market value is the true value. So is that what it should sell for? I guess in a perfect world, yes. Yes, ma'am. Tink?
Okay, so I think I'm a little confused on this part, which math is not my best subject, but I'm a little confused. I'm looking at the problem and I see where it says they're looking for the assessed value, but how do we know? Hold on, I might have just answered my own question. Never mind, I think I got it.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it. That's the best way to learn, yes? And practice, 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 practice. Okay, I got time to do another. That was fun. Let's do another one together. Similar, but different. This one says, calculate the annual property tax due for property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of 127,000, and an assessed value of 85% of market value. In this case, how do I find the assessed value? I'm going to take 85% of the market value. What's the market value? 127. What's that word of mean? Multiply. So again, we read the problem. I may not know anything else. I don't know. But what I do know, there's a really good chance that I can use a T-bar. I know once again, that's a really big T-bar, by the way. I know once again, I'm solving for my annual property taxes. I'm solving for that number on top. I know my tax rate. The problem nicely spells it out for me. 1.01 per 100, 1.01, fancy word for divide. .0101. As much as I love math, I never go off calculator. My little brain, I tell you. So I have my tax rate of 0.0101, my assessed value, which is what I care about, because that's what the formula tells me. My assessed value is 85% of market value. So if I take my market value, 127,000 times 85%, 85%, I get an assessed value, right, of 107,950. Identified what the problem is asking me. What the problem is asking me is my X. I determine my tax rate, North Carolina. How do I know that? Because it's something per 100. This is ad valorem taxes. We'll look at mill Thursday night. And then I also find my assessed value by finding 85% of my market value. On our not so smart calculators, up down line means multiply. So we take our assessed value times 0.0101. And you get, there we go. Question just came in about rounding. Question just came in about rounding. You're not going to miss a problem by rounding alone. So in other words, you're not going to have an answer choice that's 109.295 and 109.30 and 109.0.3, right? The answer choices aren't that close that you're going to miss by rounding alone. The general rule of thumb when it comes to rounding, they suggest you always go out at least 3 decimal places until you get to the very end and then round. There's going to be change when we're dealing with, for example, taxes. So I don't want you rounding to the dollar, but once we go out 3 decimal places, then we can round at this point to 1090.30. One or the other will be an answer choice. They cannot give you both. I mean, they're mean, but they're not cruel, you know? So as long as you don't get carried away with your rounding, as long as you don't eliminate change and only focus on whole dollars, you're going to do just fine. But again, the suggestion is you go out 3 places and then round at the very end. So these annual taxes, my assessed value times my tax rate says this year's annual taxes are $1,090.30. So far, so good? Ish. So when we come back together on Thursday, we are going to finish this. We're going to do some more. Again, I got a few more. I think we're going to work together. And then I'll let you guys work a few as well. Of course, I'll show you where you can find that extra practice, because it is so important we practice the math. Once we finish Unit 3, we're going to get to Unit 4. Unit 4 also has math, but I'm not going to do 2 maths in one day, because that would just be cruel. So we are going to skip Unit 4 math for now. We'll pick that up next week. So when we come together on Thursday, we're going to finish Unit 3. We're going to do the non-part math of Unit 4, and then we're going to get going on Unit 5. We'll do the Unit 4 math next week. Is that fair? I don't want to do, that's a whole lot of math to do in 1 week. So let's just break it down, bite-sized pieces. That gives you guys time to take in this tax math before we do Unit 4 math. Does that work? Okay. Please look ahead. Unit 4, Unit 5. If you're there, keep going, because we keep going. Let me know if I can answer any questions. It is 9:30 on the dot. So you guys have a great night, and we will do it again Thursday night. We'll see you guys then.